Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Big Show. My name is Scott McKay.
And I'm Emily McKay.
And since this is our first show of the year 2025, we want to wish you all Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
And appropriately enough, this is the first of two parts. We'll be following this show up next week with another show. This time, we're going to be talking about dating and relating the last 25 years, what it was like in the year 2000 up until now. And then next week, of course,
we'll talk about the next 25 years and what to expect.
Yeah, only makes sense, right?
That's right.
We love futurism around here, so it's going to be a good show. I'm looking forward to that. But we've got plenty on our plate to discuss today, Emily. Remember 25 years ago, well, I guess 25 years ago and a week, everybody was worried about Y2K. All the computers are going to blow up. The entire world is going to end because the embedded systems in computers aren't going to know what to do with a date that has a 20 in front of it instead of a 19. Remember that?
Oh, I remember. People were buying water bottles and making sure they had plenty at home. They were getting everything ready, thinking that their mortgages were going to somehow get messed up.
Well, you know what? That's the thing, though. Mortgages were already amortizing fine in 1999.
Oh, yeah. They already hit that year 2000 probably a few decades in advance.
Yeah, you know, it was really only a big marketing gimmick. All the tech companies made hand over fist money, making sure everybody was Y2K ready. And I remember the first plane that reported landing in the year 2000 was actually a Lufthansa plane that landed in Namibia or something, in like Windhoek, Namibia. And everything was fine. So they figured the planes aren't going to fall out of the sky. I'm not sure how they distilled that down to one flight. One Lufthansa flight. I mean, there must have been lots of planes in the air when it all happened. But, you know, it was pretty funny watching Australia. I guess the first place on Earth that turns the new day is Tonga, right? In the Pacific Ocean? Yeah. So it became the year 2000 in Tonga, and then there was no problem. And then the rest of us pretty much felt, okay, I guess it's going to be all right. And by the time the ball dropped in Times Square, people were pretty much over themselves. There were little bits. Remember, there were some times, every once in a while, you'd get a date or see something in a computer program or whatever where it was the year 1900, but certainly nothing catastrophic, right?
No, everything was pretty easygoing, pretty not much to report when it came to that.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, that was the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Y2K is, well, Y2K.
Yeah.
We all partied like it was 1999, 25 years ago. It was a lot of fun. For those of us who are probably older than, say, 35, it was so weird to have a date with a 2000 in the front of it. That seems so futuristic, right?
Yes, yes. You see movies about that all the time growing up, and now we're in it.
Right. Remember, if you wanted a really futuristic, forward-thinking brand like last century, you would call your computer like Gateway 2000.
Right.
Everything was something 2000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even movies.
Yeah.
Something
even
2000.
Right. 2001: A Space Odyssey was a long time ago. I mean, by now, my goodness, the Back to the Future date has come and gone like 5 years ago, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Insane. Yeah. So what were we thinking? Well, that's a great question to ask ourselves at any given moment, right? But 25 years ago, if you look back at what was going on in the world of dating and relating, 25 years ago, okay, dating was a thing. People were actually going out on dates. I mean, hookup culture was already kind of happening. People were really promiscuous.
Yes, but they were still wanting to make a connection.
Yes, and people were actually going out on dates. They weren't simply just by default hanging out like people do nowadays. I mean, it's almost unheard of for people to go on an actual real date nowadays. Although, Emily, women still really crave it deep down, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Some women do still crave that, but a lot of us still crave having a connection. I think that's just a human element. Even in today's culture where we still do hookup culture, we still crave having to connect with another human being.
Crave having to do it. Not like we get to do it, we have to do it.
Something like that.
Well, you know, I'm making fun of the diction you chose, you know, the way you worded it. But we live in such a convenience culture of immediate gratification that that's really what it's come down to. It started out with the immediate gratification. I don't want to go through dating and courtship. I just want to get laid, right?
Right.
But now it's all just too big a hassle. I mean, look at men's tailored clothing and getting dressed up. I mean, if you look back at the 60s, like the Mad Men era, right? Men were wearing fedora hats and suits just to be social. People dressed up to get on an airliner.
People dress very classy.
Right. Women actually wore dresses and looked beautiful and took the time. Nowadays, people wear their PJs to go out grocery shopping.
That's right. All the way from children, teenagers, and single people, and even those who are married. I mean, yes, we don't bother to get dressed and fix ourselves up. I call it self-care, and I think it's still important.
Well, self-care is important, taking care of ourselves, hygiene, this, that, and the other. But I really think it's about convenience. People just don't want to be bothered having to get all gussied up anymore. Now, in the past, we've talked about this on the show. Old ladies used to go out in their curlers. You don't see that anymore.
No, we don't. Thank goodness. That's one thing I can do without.
But, then again, kind of rolling your hair up in curlers has gone out of style anyway.
Oh, thank goodness. I hated that. I dreaded every time I had to put my hair in curlers. Thank goodness we don't have that anymore.
I'm glad I didn't know
perms.
you then.
Remember the perms?
Oh, man, the frizzy perms. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
I do miss those.
Now our daughter's painting her hair red.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Hair color is a thing nowadays.
That used to be people who were counterculture, like into punk and new wave. Nowadays,
it's everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah,
make your
normal.
hair red, purple, green, know, especially if you're in the NBA. I noticed that. Like a lot of the players make their hair look like Dennis Rodman nowadays, just for the heck of it.
Right.
Back then, Dennis Rodman was
a huge statement.
Yeah, right. It was. Absolutely. So the fashion has changed.
Oh, desperate. Oh, dramatically. Yeah.
It is kind of dire. I will give you that. I actually am very pleased to see women out who make an effort, like wear a sweater or wear a dress. It catches my attention because it's so darn rare nowadays. Everybody has gotten so casual. And yet makeup artistry and cosmetics have gone to a whole new level. So you have frumpier women with prettier faces. Isn't that crazy?
We want to accentuate the beautiful parts of us.
Right, accentuate the positive and, cover that mom bod up or that dad bod up, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, right.
That's not so much a bad thing sometimes.
Has our taste in men's and women's appearance changed?
I don't think so. I still like my guy to look pretty sharp and handsome, and I would imagine men like to see their women still look attractive and do their best.
Well, all right, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. In the year 2000, having a smooth chest was considered in vogue, and having a hairy chest was gross.
Right.
Whereas 10 years earlier, having a hairy chest was cool.
Right.
Nowadays, I think having a hairy chest is back. But men either have a hairy chest or a smooth chest.
Right.
It's who you are. Another thing. Back in the year 2000, men were spending hand over fist money trying not to be bald.
Oh, I think that's still a thing.
It is still a thing, but I think more men than ever either shave their head bald or get it very closely cropped like a crew cut. Back in the year 2000, having a crew cut wasn't a very cool thing to do. Close cropped hair really wasn't all that cool.
No, it wasn't. And guys back then had lots of different types of hairstyles. Now it's basically just one hairstyle.
Yeah, we used to have a lot of fashion changes very quickly, all the way through the 90s. But nowadays, it seems like if you're dressed 2000, you probably aren't going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Well, if you're dressed 2000, it could mean anything because now anything goes.
Yeah, really.
You go to the thrift shop and buy anything and it works.
Like changes in fashion style aren't nearly as profound as they used to be.
Right.
Like if you were dressed like you were still in the 70s in 1982, my goodness, you would have no friends. People would just laugh and point. And if you dressed 1982 and 1992, same thing.
Right.
Everybody in their Cavariccis would
make fun of you.
Make fun of your preppy handbook looking self, right?
Right.
Now, it seems like none of that ever really came back, but this kind of generic, casual
dress as you please.
Yeah, from 2000 on probably has sort of just stuck.
I kind of like that because if I wanted to dress from the 60s, I'd look pretty sharp.
Well, some of the 60s stuff has come back, but not like bell bottoms and like looking like you're off Soul Train or anything.
Right.
No.
That's true. So there's certain things that never made it back, although they've tried.
And the music. Remember, music kind of stopped evolving in the mid-90s.
Right.
So nowadays, we've got our own kids listening to like Led Zeppelin and like Marty Robbins. Stuff we thought was like uncool because it was too old school for us is now fair game with younger people because, hey, good music is good music. There's no such thing as my music and my parents' music anymore. It's like the whole, I guess you would call it the generation gap is a thing of the past. I mean, parents can even be cool now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You can turn on the radio and pick almost any station, and it will play anything from several decades.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Along with that, keeping it on topic here, dating and relating stuff, people look a lot better older.
They do, don't they?
Like 60-year-old women can look like 32, and men, we're looking pretty sharp and to a more mature, advanced age, right? When you watch movies from the 70s, the stars looked old.
Oh, they did. Well, I remember
bad teeth.
People being in their, our age or older and thinking, well, back then people look older faster. They aged incredibly fast.
Right.
And you were thinking, ew, gross. But nowadays people, as they get older, they are not getting old like they used to. They still keep their youth. They still keep their vitality. They're still doing active things in sports, and they're just full of life in every way possible.
That's right. You can watch a movie and look at one of the stars in the movie and Google how old they were at the time that movie happened.
Right.
And you can amaze yourself because the guy was only like 38 and he looked 60. And the women, the same thing, really.
Yes. And
right?
Yeah. And now we can Google other famous actresses and actors, and you're thinking, well, they're not that old. And you're like, wow, that person's actually 65 or 70 and they don't look anywhere near that. And like, wow, they look amazing.
Yeah. You got a 75-year-old Sylvester Stallone in Tulsa King kicking ass, believably. It's crazy. But, my point here is when you take this idea of a generation gap being non-existent nowadays, the music is still cool. The culture from that era is still cool. And combine that with people aging so well, you're seeing more and more younger people dating older people.
Well, you can now because a lot of them tend to be on the same level of energy and vitality.
That's right.
And there's no longer this gap of, well, you're acting old and boring that I don't want to date somebody who's like that. So
yeah,
yes.
if you're old and boring nowadays, you're dateless, which is weird because a lot of people are lazy and a lot of people don't take care of their health so much and they eat the wrong foods. We got more chemicals in our food than ever. There are more crazy ways to be unhealthy than ever. Yet, if you do take care of your health and you do look good for your age, you're going to find that people younger are looking to date you because you have that level of wisdom and maturity. Even older women dating younger men is a bigger thing than it ever was.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole category for it.
That was still weird and kind of gross 25 years ago.
Yeah, and now it's the norm.
Yeah, none of my friends.
That way.
None of my friends in 1995, 2000 looked at women 15, 20 years older than us and said, I want a piece of that.
Right.
Never happened.
Now we got the famous word MILFs.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. That came around sometime probably around 2003-ish.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you have mom bod and dad bod. I mean, what do we like thicker, chunkier people?
I think we do.
I think we've admitted we do. And I think you can pretty much credit that, I'm going to use that word, to porn. Because you have an anonymous internet who is making their choice in what they're looking at. And the next thing you know, we kind of like chunkier chicks than we were told we should by the modeling industry and the cosmetics industry.
Well, that mom bod is very mature.
Oh, I think it's sexy.
It's very nurturing.
I think moms and dads appreciate matronly bodies or fatherly bodies more.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't such a crime to have children if you're a woman. Although nowadays it's starting to feel like it's a crime if you want children. But, we can talk about that.
Next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about the future there. But, let's look at the whole idea of baby making.
Okay.
25 years ago versus now. Not to get too political, but we're going to go there anyway. Abortion was something that was seen as an unfortunate situation that was legal but rare. Nowadays, it's a viable form of birth control. Have we cheapened, once again, our view of our own human race, Emily?
Well, it also makes it easier to be more promiscuous because there's no consequences.
Well, let's talk about birth control. Now, when I first met you, you were on something called a NuvaRing.
Yeah.
And having sex with you, I could catch that thing, and it would hurt, especially if I caught it, lengthwise.
Right.
That was bad birth control. That thing's still on the market. It's just not very popular. But 25 years ago, we had reliable birth control. You know, you could screw like rabbits if you want to, but there's another factor people forget. We were all afraid of AIDS.
Oh, that's right. STDs and things like that we were afraid of.
Well, we were certainly more concerned about them back then than we are now.
Right. And it's not that those things have gone away. It's just that we stopped thinking about them.
Well, AIDS is treatable.
Yes.
HIV is treatable.
Right.
Yeah. Genital herpes is pretty much controllable. You can take a drug and keep it in remission so that you don't shed virus to other people and other people don't catch it. But hepatitis is still there.
Warts.
Genital warts. Now you have, for human papillomavirus, you do have vaccines for women. That keeps the really dangerous version, especially for women, at bay. The kind that causes cervical cancer.
Right. Yeah.
But,
so a lot of advancements there.
Yeah, but the zeitgeist back then was, you know, you could die or have something incurable from having sex.
Right. Or you'd be afraid that no one's going to want to touch you after you caught something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And nowadays people don't think about that as much anymore. So you've got inexpensive and very effective and widely available birth control. You have much less fear of STDs than we used to. I mean, obviously we should be safe about things.
Right. Absolutely.
And yet it's almost like a red badge of courage to have had an abortion. It's really strange.
Yeah, it's really changed a lot in the scene of things over the last 25 years.
Now, let's talk about dating advice. Because the internet was still pretty much pre-broadband, unless you lived in a really amazingly technologically advanced area, like a Bay Area or somewhere like that, most people were using dial-up in the year 2000. Still, okay? Online dating was in its infancy. Apps were 9 or 10 years away, because smartphones were 7 or 8 years away, right? And any online dating people were doing, up until even when you and I met online, which was 5-6 years into the new millennium, it was stigmatized.
Yes, it still had a little bit of a stigma that if you're online dating that you were somehow a loser or that only, you know, rejects of society are online. Yeah,
it was kind of tantamount to posting a personal ad in like your local indie newspaper.
Or
right?
that
Just gross, right?
Or that you might end up with Ted Bundy from there.
Yeah, like you're an SWF 34, right? Looking for, you know.
Oh, yes, that's
exactly,
right.
Yeah. And of course, you know, the whole Rupert Holmes song, Do You Like Pina Coladas? Getting Caught in the Rain.
Right.
Actually, the name of that song is Escape. Did you know that?
I did not.
It's not the Pina Colada song. The Pina Colada song is parenthetically added later so people would know what the heck the record was. But I remember back when I first started online dating in 2003, probably a third of the ads talked about pina coladas and getting caught in the rain because people didn't know what else to write.
Yeah. Now we have AI.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, ChatGPT can just help you fake your way through it. Remember, people didn't even have pictures.
Oh, that's right.
Because digital photography was still not ubiquitous yet.
Yeah, to find a way to either download one, copy one, somehow get it on your computer to get it into your dating profile.
But I'll tell you what, by 2004, 2005...
it was easier. Your phones had that technology.
Right. It was a bad excuse if you did not have a picture. You needed a real good excuse. No one was going to write you by 2004, 2005 if you didn't have pictures.
Yeah, I remember having the Motorola flip phone with its first camera on there, and that was pretty, for its time, it was really amazing.
Yeah, right. There were no smartphones yet when you and I met. There were no apps yet when you and I met.
That's right. There were none of that. The closest thing to that was that little game called Snake. It would just kind of go around and you push your buttons up and down.
That was the closest thing to a dating app?
Not a dating app, but just an app at all.
Oh, you mean like a game?
Anything. Not even a dating app, but just an app of any sort. That was the closest thing we had.
Do you remember hotornot.com?
I do not. Never heard of it.
You never heard of Hot or Not?
No.
Hot or Not was an addictive webpage. And they would show you pictures of people. And you put thumbs up or thumbs down. Are they hot or are they not? And after you clicked, you would see the person's ranking from 1 to 10.
Oh, boy.
And so people were putting their pictures up there to see what the anonymous internet thought of them.
Yeah.
And it was addictive. And it was really the beginning of people being addicted to swiping left, swiping right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You'd have to put up I would have to put up a glamour shot for that one.
Well, glamour shots. Remember, it was harder to fake pictures.
Oh, yes. That wasn't a thing back then.
No. I mean, it took Instagram and Snapchat to bring us filters where it was really easy for the mainstream to modify their pictures.
Yes.
You know, you pretty much looked like your bad pictures back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a lot easier to tell who was being fake and who was being real in the online dating world back in 03, 04, 05.
As long as the old pictures weren't posted.
Right. Yeah. See, that's the thing. It still wasn't free of complication because people would post old pictures, 40, 50 pound ago pictures, right?
Or
blurry pictures.
20-year younger pictures.
Right. Yeah. There were still ways people could fake it. But man, for all the complaining we did back in the day, man, we didn't see it coming, did we?
Oh, no. We didn't see this coming. No.
Nowadays, it's easier to be fake than real.
Yeah.
ChatGPT and women and men both filtering their pictures. You don't even know who you're meeting.
On live video at that. You have a filter while you're still videoing. You're looking amazing and, 20 years younger in a video.
Well, let's talk about the whole technology of communication. 25 years ago, texting was in its infancy.
Oh, I remember that. Yes.
I read something that said by the end of the year 2000, okay, which would fit the window of what we're talking about here, people were sending on average 35 texts a month if they had texting service. Because remember, each one of them cost like 60 or 70 cents.
They were not cheap. No.
You couldn't just go, yes, no, all right, see you there. Cool,
yes.
Sounds good. You couldn't do that. You're already down $10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So really, you couldn't go around texting each other.
No, and not everybody had a cell phone to text with.
They were expensive.
Or most lines were landlines. So if you got a phone number from someone, it usually wasn't tied to the ability of texting.
And then answering machines. Oh my God, if you're asking a woman out, you're calling her on the phone and you don't know her very well, you were put on the spot, man.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And you hope if you mess it up, it'll give you the opportunity to maybe erase and re-record. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, but you usually didn't have that option.
You didn't know because you didn't know what carrier they were on. Like Sprint had it, AT&T didn't.
Right.
So you just had to pray that you had another shot if you screwed it up.
Right, that's right.
That was awful, man. It put men on the spot big time. Texting, of course, took care of having to think of something immediately that was so wonderful and so sharp and so smooth, but it also took all nonverbal communication out of it. Remember, we had friends who were infamous for screwing up every relationship they had because they were treating texting like they were going to be understood word for word when they were taken wrong and out of context all the time.
And using texting as a substitute of real conversation.
Oh, I was very much against it.
Oh, both of us were, and we still are. That hasn't changed.
Oh, yeah. That shows you how long we've been in the dating advice business, folks. I still get ragged on by people who say, I can't believe you don't believe in texting. I go, dude, you're reading something from the year 2007. Okay. I've evolved my thinking. It wasn't like, I've changed my mind. The world has changed around me. Texting is here. It's not going anywhere. Video conferencing was wonky at best. Most people didn't even want it.
Right.
And now, of course, we have video Zoom and video sex. And during COVID, people were going on video dates. All that we were afraid that was coming more than hopeful that it was coming, weren't we?
Still are. A lot of times we still don't want to be on Zoom. I mean, if you're at work and you have to be on a Zoom call, you're like, oh man, do I have to put on my makeup just for, just to be on the screen?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was kind of fun to get naked with people over video before you met them, I guess. But even before broadband, that was going to be wonky at best. Yahoo IM, Messenger, chat in real time.
Mm-hmm.
That came after texting.
All of that, long after.
I mean, literally, if you wanted to ask a woman out back then, you picked up the phone and called her, or you did it in real life.
Yeah.
And then you were faced with the dreaded voicemail.
That's right.
Now, all of that said, there wasn't a whole lot of dating advice. Remember, we started to talk about that. If you were a guy with no game, you were basically
in the dark.
You were out of luck. You were wondering how other guys did it.
Yeah. You needed a best buddy to come and help pull you out of it.
Right. The PUA movement was underground. It was in chat rooms. Remember chat rooms? Yeah.
And no one wanted to admit it either. Right.
Everybody wasn't admitting who they were. They were trying to trick women into bed. Man, the dating advice thing has evolved so much in 25 years. Around us. Mm-hmm. We've had to bend and flex and change how we do things. A lot happened when the smartphones
came into play.
All
the different apps, the swiping and the quick gratification, all those things have really changed the way people date and interact and relate to one another.
Social media, Facebook and Twitter, All of a sudden, people could interact who hardly ever even saw each other, or hadn't met each other, or hadn't seen each other since high school 20 years ago. All of a sudden, we were all friends again.
Reigniting new flames.
Right, yeah.
Destroying other ones.
Right, exactly. All of a sudden, people were cyber cheating.
Yes.
That never happened before the year 2000.
Yeah, didn't have the possibility of it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was something that's this century. And all of that cyber communication and texting and video is so normal nowadays. It's kind of like we forget the way it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like before microwaves, you had to open up a can of soup and heat it in a pot.
Right.
Yeah, it's like we forget about those days. So then with the smartphones and the social media came people in their echo chambers. Next thing you know, Me Too movement, men going their own way.
Yeah, guys being afraid to talk to women for fear that they might be viewed as a predator.
Right. Women who have been victims of predators now in groups together. And what happened when these echo chambers of people formed is it began to feel like everybody in the world was as passionate about your cause and your thing as you were. And certainly women being sexually assaulted is a horrible thing and they need a support group. But when that echo chamber starts being all about hating all men and believing all women and no women can do any wrong, and it kind of starts spiraling out of control, that's when the problem started that led to a lot of social issues at large, fomented by relatively small groups of people online. And of course, the Me Too movement is only one example. There are many others as well.
Right. And then you fail to realize that you're no longer a victim, but that you could actually become victorious over your situation. But in an echo chamber, it unfortunately, instead of feeding something positive and helping turn a bad thing to something good, it created a lot of negative responses.
Right. And it kept going on that way until people really were just very angry with each other. And behind the anonymity of the internet again, people could just be rude and mean to each other. I mean, there was no YouTube in the year 2000. Imagine.
That's right. There wasn't.
No, there wasn't broadband yet, right? Instagram influencers, everybody having their own private channel and becoming famous out there, unheard of.
That was still another 10 years out.
Yeah, exactly. Now women can all be basically supermodels out there and have guys chase them.
Right?
Right, exactly. But with the wokeness came more pressure on masculinity. There was always pressure on masculinity, and I believe that's a power struggle. And so that was nothing new.
Right.
All the seeds for what's nowadays known as wokeness have been planted for decades. But finally, after social media became huge, I think those echo chambers of people could really wield their opinions like a weapon and really have a broad-reaching voice together. And, natural entropy says that became the realm of complainers, people who were upset.
Right. And those who were happy were quiet in their own little corner, making no noise. So the only people we heard was those complaining about things.
Right. The family law system was already biased against men. If a woman divorced a man, the woman could say, I want the kids, he's a jerk. And basically the judge would always agree with it. Nowadays, I think that's softening up a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, now we have women who are afraid of losing their kids.
Well, because they're crazy. We've seen enough crazy women out there and women who are kind of unhinged that people are wise to it. And people are wise to all these unhinged people. We'll talk about that more next week. The future of the unhinged.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even the normal women are afraid of that.
Oh, yeah. I think women are afraid of each other.
Well, I mean, I think the legal system has, in many ways, come full circle and is trying to be more fair and kind to both the father and the mother, or the husband and the wife.
Yes, people I know who are in the know seem to be saying that. The last thing I want to cover before we close this particular episode is it used to be that if you were anything other than straight, it was stigmatized.
Oh, yes, big time.
In the year 2010, it was okay to make fun of gay people in movies and on TV.
Oh, yes.
No longer,
right? That happened pretty quickly. People start to be more kind and not give people with other lifestyles a hard time.
Yeah, people are flabbergasted when they find out that Donald Trump was the first president who was for gay marriage on the day he was inaugurated. It wasn't Obama. People are amazed by that, but it shouldn't be because this has been a very rapidly progressing movement. Nowadays, being a kid in school and being gay is cool. I mean, you wanted to be in the closet in high school back when I was in high school if you were gay. The trans movement, it was extremely rare in the year 2000 to know anybody who was trans. Like if there was a hostess at a restaurant who was trans, everybody talked about them. Transvestites were a thing. Cross-dressers. Now you don't hear about cross-dressers as much anymore. I'm sure people will email us and tell us that transvestites are alive and well out there. But you hear a lot more about being transsexual than you hear about being a transvestite nowadays.
Yeah, well, there's just so many different labels and so many different ways to make a lifestyle that it's hard to keep up with.
Yeah, being bisexual for women is not stigmatized. Neither is it for men. Alternative lifestyles, being a swinger, I think is still pretty outside the mainstream. But in terms of sexual preference and sexual orientation,
there have been a lot of changes in 25 years.
Right. The sky is the limit. But you saw about 4 or 5 years ago the likes of Match.com trying to impose upon straight men to be open to dating trans women, and that backfired. So I think we've come full circle to where, hey, whatever your sexual orientation and or your sexual preference is, it's okay. It's got to be okay. And that's where we are nowadays.
Well, at least society.
At least society is. I mean, there may be certain outlying people out there who are still judgmental. But that's where society is nowadays. There's more pressure on the birth rate than ever before. We've talked about that in previous shows. But people want to have fewer babies. People are having fewer babies. Next week, we'll talk about what track is society really on.
Well, that's going to be a great conversation next week because the whole idea with children and everything really makes a unit for a family. And how that relates to dating and relationships and all that good stuff. It makes a difference. And there's a lot to be said about all of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next week's conversation.
Yes.
But this has been a fun conversation that took some twists and turns I didn't see coming. Yeah, I hope and trust you all have enjoyed looking, into the Wayback Machine with us back at the year 2000 up until now. And man, we really have changed.
A quarter of a century has gone by.
Quarter of a century. Hey, you know what? The year 2025 is here. The rest of the century is ahead of us.
That's right. We have lots to look forward to.
And if you would like to enter this year and the rest of the century with a much better grip on finding the right person in your life to have a relationship with or maybe spend the rest of this century with, we want to talk to you.
We do. We want to hear from you.
If you're a guy listening to this feed, go to mountaintoppodcast.com. Get on my calendar. You can talk to me for free for 25 minutes. If you are on the X and Y on the Fly feed and you're a man or a woman, you can go to scottandemily.com/podcast and get on our calendar there too. We appreciate every one of you. Man, as we talk about being 25 years into this century, we've been podcasting for 19 of them.
Yay. We should celebrate when we hit 20 years.
Yeah, we should do
something
that.
special.
Oh, we will.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So once again, thank you for listening to this particular episode on dating and relating the last 25 years. And we look forward to talking to you next week when we cover
the next 25 years.
And until then, my name is Scott McKay.
And I'm Emily McKay.
Be good out there.
And have fun.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X and Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X and Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.